If Marley is in there, she can check the live stream.
Meetings of
Just testing, sorry.
Okay. Army.
The thing, no, it's one of the. Because you don't have to teach them that 1 year notice.
Like that first meeting, so to speak. Okay.
A bunch of stuff.
Basic functions of the.
What's the It was.
I don't know. Yeah, no, Mark, thank you.
Meetings of the Johnson County Board of Supervisors are open to the public and are generally live streamed. To join electronically, please visit bit.ly/JocoMeeting. Written comments may be submitted to sups@johnsoncountyiowa.gov. If you require accommodations to participate, please contact the board office at 319-356-6000 prior to the meeting. Public comment is at the discretion of the chairperson. Comments should be limited to 3 minutes. Due to public meeting laws, the board may only discuss or act on matters presented on this agenda. Welcome.
Good afternoon. We'll come to order. It's 3:30 p.m. Today is Thursday, April 10th, 2025, and this is a meeting of the Johnson County Criminal Justice Coordinating Committee. Roll call, please. Just supervisor.
Okay. Sullivan,
Here.
Green,
Present.
Bixmar, here. Green Douglas, here. Remington.
Supervisor Remington is absent with 4 supervisors. We have a quorum. Item B on our agenda is public comment. Is there anyone with public comment? Anyone with public comment this afternoon? Any public comment? Seeing none, we'll move on to item C, CJCC business. Item C1, discussion and update, read jail tours of Dallas and Woodbury counties. Sheriff?
But as most of you know, because a lot of you were there, we did a couple of tours a few weeks ago. Thanks to all of you that took the time to go. I appreciate it. I think it was beneficial in a lot of ways. And I wanted to come back to the committee and talk about it too as a group, to hear the takeaways from everybody. You know, what you learned, what you saw, what was good, what are things to think about, what's the feedback from the other entities that were involved on their end, and how can we apply any of that to us. And so for those of you that weren't there too, to kind of hear the feedback and why it's valuable. So I hope everybody brought a few ideas, and then looking forward to hearing them. So wherever you want to start, sir.
Yeah, just for the record, once again, I want to, on behalf of the county, to thank both Woodbury and Dallas counties for their hospitality. For me, I think the biggest single takeaway was at Woodbury County. I especially appreciated the candor of the sheriff and their one supervisor that joined us. I think that they did an excellent job reflecting on some of the mistakes that they made and some potential pitfalls that if we do move forward in conjunction with the city of Iowa City, I think that there's a lot for us to learn from that, and just really appreciate that they were as honest and forthcoming as they were.
Yeah, I attended Dallas County and just really again wanted to echo a thanks to Sheriff in content. Some of the things that I found were interesting was, you know, Dallas County now is becoming more influenced and more influenced by Des Moines, right? So they had 4 bond referendums. And it's just that, you know, more of the metro is getting to be more in that part of the county. So I thought that was interesting and also I think of note as we're somewhat similar. One thing, a couple of things that struck me when they were talking about their campaign leading up to it, their former sheriff was really like their champion. And they said that for them, that was really important to have him out there because I think they said something like he ran 200 meetings or upwards of 200 meetings, like going and talking to Rotary and, you know, whoever it was that was gathering Lions Club, those kinds of things. And that they had 7 community meetings. So just kind of good to hear one perspective and like one way to do that. A couple other things, so they have about 130 beds, but they use about 53.5 average. So they are quite large and they own 40 acres, I think, it's 40 acres. And they have the ability to expand to 2 more buildings. So that's, you know, they're thinking about it in a phased way. Obviously, they're not utilizing all their bed space. Another thing that was different was they have a courtroom in the building for initial appearances. And they indicated how incredible that was for them to not have to shuffle between and find people. And like, it was just really helpful. And that it's, you know, Fridays at 9 a.m. or whatever. So I thought that was really great. And, you know, this is a learning curve for me. So it was really cool to hear how they kind of address some of those gaps. Whether that's transportation, timing. Some other things were, you know, in terms of what they had a library, but, you know, they weren't actually having inmates come and be in the library, they were rolling around. They also had a gym and they were doing virtual visitation. So they had that kind of separate too, which they talked about how that would be easier for, you know, family members and lawyers and things like that to be able to just zoom in. And then they also had their pharmacy and they had a nurse and they had a medical area with a bathroom. I can't hear.
Sorry, we're trying to take care of some audio visual. I didn't mean that.
No, that's okay.
I'm sorry.
I definitely want people to be able to hear.
I think they're struggling to hear us online, sorry.
Oh, okay.
You keep going,
Sure.
we're trying.
So I think just as we're thinking about the uses of the buildings and, you know, what's been done before, one thing of note was the gym area would also double as a cooling off place after fights or disagreements. And they had some, just as Woodbury, you know, I really appreciated the candid conversation, things that did not work well. You know, they had this huge window that had a lot of bars on it, and they're like pushing the button and it's kind of like going up and they're like, there's our daylight. Was that super useful? Was that, you know what I mean? Like, could they have kind of designed that differently to be more efficient, I guess? So things like that. And another thing they talked about was they had a hallway separation between the jail infrastructure and the staff. And they talked about how important that was because then they were able to just walk people through without having to go through all of the cell area, things like that. So it was very clean in terms of lockdown. They had community access from the back for things that weren't necessarily, they were jail adjacent, but it's not like they were getting taken to the jail or needed a visitation. So they had a whole area that was just like a half of the building. I thought that was a really interesting way of doing things in terms of utility. And they said that was really important to have that hallway. The geothermal, like I was very surprised the whole building was geothermal, but that's actually, I think it's a county policy that all new buildings are geothermal, which, wow, we should really look at that. Very impressive. And they said, you know, they've never had any issues with that. Another thing was the body scanner. So they also said that was really important for them, even though it's a bit of change. that in terms of safety and staff at the, especially the booking area, that was like really important. Yeah, so you literally kind of go in and scans all the things. Yeah. So it's not cheap though. It's definitely one of the pricier items, but they just said it was absolutely invaluable, as you can imagine, for any number of things.
And sorry to interrupt, but they talk about that as being something you put like on your capital improvement plan for replacement too, you just.
Yes.
So they spent all the money.
Did that?
Woodbury did.
Yeah, I think this was right, this was for
Yeah.
Woodbury is newer.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, so. And also they talked about how initially in design phase, similar to us, they were going to a structure where it was like you have a central command, which was really impressive, right? And you can see everybody, but they said that that doesn't necessarily mean that you won't get you won't need additional staff. In fact, they said that that's just not true, which I found interesting because that is kind of what we've been told is like you would either maintain staff or need less staff. And they said that that's just not how that's shaken out for them, because you can't see everywhere. Like, in fact, they had this really cool like control center, but then they had like a table out front where somebody was just like sitting there watching people because they were like, well, you can't see all the different floors. So, so I thought that was interesting too, in terms of how we're thinking about this central control structure, which was really impressive, and you can see the benefits of that, but that, you know, there's still something about having the person, right? That, you know, I don't think planning for the same amount or fewer is necessarily, you know, shaking out. So, but really appreciate that tour, and those are some of the like highlights of that.
Well, I agree with John. I thought that the candid conversations about what works and doesn't work in Woodbury County were very, very helpful. Probably the biggest takeaway I would have from both places is technology. I don't think they can emphasize that enough. I think we recognize that we're not just behind in space, we're far behind in technology. And even once you make these investments in technology, as one guy pointed out, you know, as soon as you get it, you're behind. Because there's a new version that's out, a new generation. And so you're going to have to not only budget for the new technology, but you've got to be on those maintenance programs to keep everything up. And it's going to be expensive, but that there's really no better way than to invest in this technology.
I'll come back to me because I'll fill in on some of the stuff in our snaps too. Eric. Yeah, Eric was in.
Oh, that was the chauffeur. No, well, I'll tell you this, having built a jail in Clinton County and then gone to visit these other two, and then actually, I just went through our jail again here, and I'll just say something that's overall. I can't. When I was in Clinton County, I think I told the sheriff this and Julie this the other day. I would, because I had the insurance and liability, and I seriously, I would wake up every morning and wait for the sheriff to call me and tell me what claim we're filing, whether it was for one of our inmates or worse, if it was for one of our staff. And I think, you know, I went and saw those and saw a lot of similarities what Clinton County did. But again, last week, whatever it was, we went again through the jail here Monday. Thanks. It just really impressed upon me that this is not a great place for or to have our inmates in, but more importantly, it's not a great place for our COs and our jail staff to be working in, you know, for everybody's safety and stability. It's not fantastic. And so I'll just leave that I'll just stand on that, a greater view of it. It's pretty eye-opening when to see it. Again, it's Woodbury and Dallas, and I've been in our Clinton County one several times. It's still not, it's not a hotel suite for these inmates. But they deserve a little bit more dignity, sorry, than what we have here. But for sure, for our CO staff and those folks, that would make a huge difference. So thanks again. That was really a great follow-up. Again, if anybody that went on the trips to Woodbury and Dallas and haven't been back in our jail for a while, I'm sure the sheriff will take you through again. The contrast is startling. Thanks.
First, I wanted to thank Aaron and Paige for doing all of the logistics. Thank you. That was a lot of work. But also just echoing a little bit of what everybody said, but I just honestly felt embarrassed when I went into those facilities because like when I saw the pods in Woodbury where people have like sort of a communal area where they were talking, but they could go back and lay in their own area with their own bathroom and all of that, you know, they do deserve dignity and a safe space and a healthier space. And I was ashamed that we have gotten to the place we are, and that's what people in, no offense to Western Iowa, but Woodbury County can do that. We can certainly do something as nice or nicer and better for our staff and our inmates. And just to think of all the things that we could do with our diversion programs with more space. I think Woodbury said they have AA, they have groups in there now. So we could be doing all of that too. So it just made me think that this is very emergent. Like Eric said, not just for liability, even though I look out for that too, but just for people to take care of them.
Nathan?
Okay. On a human level, I'll say the number one thing I noticed immediately was the smell. With the contrast, I was just like, in the newer facilities, there were basically no moments where I thought like, oh, that doesn't smell right. And I can't say that, but in our jail. So that was just the most striking thing. Coming with the legal perspective, like you mentioned, the court had like that ability to do, like for people to meet with their attorneys safely, to be able to attend court in a way that keeps everybody safe. Especially, I really was fascinated the Woodbury, like the elevator that comes up, like just thinking of how different that is from what our current situation is like for someone who has to go from jail to court, back to jail. I think I mentioned this recently in a different meeting, but one of the things that stood out to me the most also was just the sheriff of Woodbury and kind of how he talked about, you know, and what I would say, if I had to be in jail, I would choose one of those other jails if I could, like.
The building of the sheriff.
Yeah. But the sheriff talked about like, you know, if my friends or my family got picked up and someone had to be held, you know, a lot of the people that we're holding here, they're innocent till they're proven guilty. They deserve that dignity while, you know, and for like you're talking about, a lot of them, it's a very brief stay for the most part. But whether it's brief or not brief, people need to, they need to be safe, and the people who are you know, whose job it is to kind of watch out for them and make sure that they're safe while they're in there are also able to do their job well. So I agree that like having safe corridors and space to move around, space to do maintenance, being able to access things. It was just like, you could see how, and I think it was helpful to hear about things that they didn't think of or that they would do differently, but for the most part, a lot of good thought went into those facilities and they turned out really well. So, yeah, the evidence rooms, the courtroom, just that stuff struck me as like, wow, like this is really nice. And you could see like, has a really, those pieces particularly have a connection to us, like being able to do our job when it comes to the going to court side of things.
Anyone else before we throw it back to the sheriff?
I have a question. Did you guys take pictures of what these places look like inside?
We don't allow phones.
Okay. All right. And did the architects or any of the potential people that are going to be designing the new place, did they go and see any of these?
No, but the Shive concept from our space study is essentially what Dallas County has. The only difference on the housing side of it, I think the difference is 9 beds. I think Shive recommend 140, Dallas is 131. So what you walk through in Dallas is fundamentally what we would look to do here. The big difference would be on the booking side of design and the intake area where the body scanner is, safety cells, the Sally port, that kind of thing. But on the housing and programming side of it, fundamentally be the same thing. We're gonna go on time. I'll kick it over to you guys. Lieutenant Moses, I'll start with you.
For me, I help cover our nurse when she's not around, and if you guys have been to our jail and seen our medical versus the Woodbury County medical, night and day difference. They actually had observation cells. They had, pass-through cells for people that are, hurting themselves or others, where you can go straight from intake into there, and then observation from the nurse's side. That was a huge takeaway for me, just to see what that could be so that we can give them proper medical care.
And then
I always stress the safety side of things and the ability to have a control center where you have the degree of viewing of all cells at all times is beyond being said. It's just that's a big deal where we don't have that now. Like we have to go into this room. It's dangerous. We don't know where things are at. It's just so that's a big part that I think is going to really help us out.
Captain Bill or Jalen.
Hi, a little bit. I had a laundry list of stuff, and I'm kind of like a detailed type of person where outside their holding cells, they have grates, which are drainage for that. Along that same line as Lieutenant Moses was talking about the 24-hour med service, they had like a 24-hour, and I think they quoted like a $2 million bill for that service, but the sheriff mentioned it was like a cost savings. It's costly up front, but it really costs them, it saved that liability to manage those inmates when they're in custody of their sheriff. And just really space, and I think all of you have toured our jail. And when you go to tour these other jails, you can walk 4 people wide, and get crash carts, down the hallways. At our current facility, we can even get a bed to wrap around the bars or inside the doors. And some of those doors you just can't even fit a wheelchair in certain spaces because they're not ADA compliant. So it's just little things like that and I'm just jealous, to be honest with you. I've been in corrections for a long time. I've been hired as the sheriff since 2001. You really do want to say out loud, but so I've been in the jail my entire career, and so it's just one of those things where and to have programming and stuff like that, we just do not have a facility. And you look at the rooms that they had access to, and it's like, wow, I mean, such as this one. I'm looking at this room right now. I'm like, wow, we could fit more than 5 people in a room, and that type of thing. So it's just, that really benefits the staff as well, because we are crushed in a small space. So that's what I've done.
I would just say I appreciated the facilities manager and the board member that was there also. And I thought it was just, we asked them for a list of lessons learned, as we go into this before we get too far, because they just have so many things. Even walking through that chase, they were like, when you're at this stage, you need to make sure that, the contractors aren't building the end of this space because that caused this problem, or the fire exits, and that would be really beneficial just to ask them. I'm sure they would. Just give us a list of everything we should be aware of as we go down this path.
In Woodbury County, the facilities director was there, which was just almost as valuable as that.
I mean, for me, again, there were 2 largely different facilities, though. I mean, I think what I took away was from Dallas is a lot like what ideally we could have here. Woodbury showed us, I think, the method, or somebody used the mechanism. John was a term about how doing the law enforcement authorities, the mechanism. So I think we're able to see what what we'd like to have conceptually, and then the path for getting there. I'm glad Woodbury was kind of the guinea pig for doing this joint effort between the city and the county, because there were a lot of lessons they learned, and I think they did a really good job of being honest and pretty candid about those things. I mean, I don't want to repeat a lot of what everybody said, but something that it's been resonating with me actually from the SAMHSA workshop we did last week, but the term that was used when talking about medical care facility in a facility was constitutionally adequate. And I can't get past that when I think about not only medical care, but really everything that we're doing. I mean, the staff, they work there every day doing a good job taking care of people in a building that is, I think, not holding up its end of the bargain in a lot of ways. And from, we mentioned the smell, to the size of the doors, to the ADA component. We just had a guy in last week that's wheelchair bound, and we've really got one place that we can put him, and it's that it takes up a holding cell. And then the domino effect of the classification housing problem is it's just not acceptable. So I think seeing what a modern, constitutionally adequate, legally compliant facility looks like should be, I really hope it's something we can all come together on and see this is what we need to work towards. And, you know, I think the missed opportunities we have for educational opportunities, service providers to come in and be a part of what we're doing, but we can't because we don't have a place to do it. The facilities piece of it too, knowing that you can construct it in a way so when you have a maintenance problem, you don't have to have maintenance staff going in the housing unit. It's all done behind. You can take care of everything without even having to have somebody go in the unit. The last thing. And then and what we didn't spend a lot of time talking about was outside of the jail or the other sheriff's office functions, we got to see and how to have a lobby that is set up in a way to accommodate the needs of a very busy sheriff's office. So at Dallas County, you come in the front, a large lobby, there's the training room where we met off the side, and there's a door goes in the administrative side of the sheriff's office, records and civil were in there. You could have the public coming in and conducting business, and they weren't crossing paths. And then there's a separate private area to the side where when people are coming in for like sex offender registry compliance and their updates, they're not having to stand there next to somebody getting their weapons permit, repeating their social security number and saying, I'm here to update my sex offender registry information. So there's some little bit of dignity we can still provide by providing privacy. And this kind of played out for us Tuesday or Wednesday. When I looked in our lobby, Lieutenant Roll was in the lobby doing the sheriff's sale, so auctioning off a house in our lobby with realtors and bank people working or standing there. A sex offender had came in to update his registry information, and court was wrapping up in the jail. So we had people like getting released and bonding, and all that was going on in about 20 square feet, 30 square feet of room in the front lobby. So just seeing how you could have a building that is accessible to the public and conduct public business where it's not so cramped is really something we're just lacking here. And what played out the other day happens half the week, it seems like. So no, I was really glad it all worked out. Again, I'm very appreciative of the opportunity, and yeah, the sheriffs, I know John, you sent an email, I appreciate it. They extend the gratitude to those sheriffs. They're very gracious to set aside half their day to have 15 of us come through. And the last thing I'll add about the courtroom side of it, what Woodbury did, and this, I like it, I think we can all agree, it's balloons, and I don't want to put it out there as a road to go down, but they moved their criminal courts to the same building. So the Woodbury County Jail also houses criminal courts, county attorney's office, probation,
Or, yeah, I think.
or the county attorney have an office out there. So they aren't even transporting inmates anywhere. It's all done internally, which is, I mean, it's cool. I can't imagine what that would add to the cost here. If it's something to And
Would it solve some of the space problems in the courthouse? Isn't that also an issue?
I mean, it's a whole nother.
it really becomes a whole nother issue.
As much as the courthouse.
Well, I don't think we have as much, I don't think we have the space if we use the location that it's.
It does, it fundamentally changes the scope of it, but I think it does show the importance of having, to be mentioned it. Having a courtroom in the facility, which again, in the space that we did, that's built into. So I think at least having one does open the doors.
If you're starting from scratch, that would probably be the way you would want things to be, but we're not starting from scratch.
But it did highlight the importance of having an actual courtroom in the building for certain, and it still has to be accessible to the public. No, I'm really glad it all came together, and yeah, thanks to the ones who handle the logistics for it. Appreciate it to get different offices, different employees all lined up to go is not easy, so thanks for taking care of it.
Yeah, I think Dallas County too, they're gonna build their courthouse right next, again, they have 40 acres. So they're gonna, instead of just having that one room, they're gonna build their whole, and that's another thought that they're gonna have to go through, but. Which is interesting, because of course they have an older courthouse like every town, every county seat, but it is something to think about though, in terms of initial appearances, in terms of those two.
I mean, we already do initial appearances by
Yeah,
video, but like.
and we do it in this space, yeah.
Yeah.
And then after that, it's, there's defense attorneys are trying to come in, and everything else, we do it all out of the same room.
The other thing that Woodbury didn't have, which I guess I didn't totally understand till we got there, is that the city of Sioux City was the partner in the authority, but they don't really, the only thing that they were attached to was the land that they built the facility on. They weren't running like,
And road.
yeah, the road, but they weren't running a police department out of the building. So that was also different. So that makes more different.
I think they did have maybe a little bit of city attorney office space.
Yeah, but like, there's like.
It was like very small.
A brewing plaza.
Exactly.
And maybe I think they had an agreement to, like, the police can use the evidence room, maybe.
Yeah, but it was like they weren't running the Sioux City.
Yeah, it was very small.
Very good, everyone. Any final thoughts on this matter? All right. Please.
Since I didn't get to see it, and I'm so sorry that I couldn't join you, but the physical space for the people that are in the jail, is it safer than what we have here in terms of like the bed, the surfaces? Like, I'm still haunted by that concrete slab that's over there in your holding area or whatever you call that space. Was there any of that?
Yeah, so the safe, so that would be our best example of our equivalent of a safety cell. Safety cells in these jails are padded cells, which we don't have. And they are, it's like a solid continuous padding, and it's actually almost rounded, so it slopes towards the middle.
It's really sharp.
Yeah, there's none of those. Can't remind me, the beds that were like the poly.
Yeah.
They're not the metal. You want to describe those for a minute or how they look?
Yeah, they're almost like this type of material kind of, it's just that hard plastic that,
Right.
and it's on the floor, so you cannot slide, that person cannot slide underneath the block to hide or whatever they're doing. You have to obviously have a visual on that, so.
And our beds are also, they're metal, they're steel, so they're, sharp corners, sharp edges. You don't see that. So no, it's fundamentally different than what we're seeing. Absolutely.
Okay. And no solitary confinement issues in the newer facilities. They're not leaving those horrible cells where the only daylight a person can see is like this looking out the door. None of that anymore, hopefully.
Well,
I think there was one room, they had some padded rooms, but they had like a pretty big window on the outside. I think that was like a safe, those were for very specific short term. That wasn't someplace where someone would sleep.
You didn't stay there. very
No.
long.
No, those are, they're like temporary holding cells, safety cells, and one of the, I'd never seen this before, the Woodbury pass through. Again, there's a door on the booking side of it, but then on the other side, there's a door on the medical side, so both staff are observed, and it's a pass through over the medical team.
Sorry.
No. Any additional questions? Good discussion? Good trip. Thank you to everybody who helped coordinate it. Sure appreciate it. Item C2 on our agenda, just gonna try and shift around, so hopefully the folks online hear me. Item 2 is Dr. Allison Lynch, Mental Health and Substance Use Disorders and the Interface with Jail presentation.
Okay, I'm gonna pass out. I got 15 copies of this brief slide deck to go through. They asked me to send to my slide Tuesday afternoon, and I did not get them done in time, so I printed off some copies. So I apologize for that. I can send you my slides if you would like to share those with the group afterwards.
Yes, please.
And I really was, I met with the sheriff maybe a month ago talking about this presentation and trying to wrap my head around what I was going to share. It's a little hard for me to talk in 10 to 15 minutes about mental health and substance use. It's like a gigantic topic. So I tried to distill it down to a couple of key points. And I actually wanted to say that the conversation about the trips that some of us went on really teed this up. So thanks for that. So the first point I wanted to make is just that mental health and substance use disorders are really common in our society and nationally in the world. There's a federal agency called SAMHSA, which is part of the Department of Health and Human Services at the federal level. And they do an annual survey called the National Survey on Drug Use and Health, which actually does not include incarcerated people. It used to be called the Household Survey, as people who are living in households. But it is the best way we have right now for monitoring the prevalence of substance use and mental health conditions in the U.S. and also treatment trends and things. And so from that, we know that about 1 in 5 adults in the U.S. has a mental health disorder, experiences mental illness, and about 1 in 10 adults in the U.S. experiences a substance use disorder. So these are prevalent conditions. And untreated mental health and substance use disorders can cause significant adverse outcomes, including human suffering, high healthcare costs, lost productivity, loss or lack of housing, and incarceration. And I just want to add, I'm looking at this as a member of this committee who's a psychiatrist by training. I'm also a family physician by training, so I think about prevention and I think about lifelong health, and I mostly take care of people with substance use disorder. So that's the lens I'm looking through at this through. But I'm going to try to focus it specifically on the purposes of this committee. The next slide is basically just a couple of different, one is a poster from NAMI talking about the prevalence of mental health issues in the US, and then something from the MMWR, which is a monthly report from the CDC, and then another headline from an article just about the cost. These are significant health issues. The next page is also from the annual National Survey on Drug Use and Health, basically illustrating that whether we look at just any mental illness or serious mental illness, that both of those groups frequently co-occur with substance use disorders. So it's not uncommon to have people who have both a mental illness and substance use disorder. So then my next point is that there's a lot of people in the carceral system in the US that have mental health and substance use issues. And, you know, kind of the way we have things set up, we direct a lot of people with mental health and or substance use disorders to our jail and prison system. And so just a couple of examples from that. So I tried to see if I could get, you know, how local data could I get? There's nothing published that I could find about mental health or substance use rates in the Johnson County Jail. And even at the state level, it's very difficult to nail things down to the county level. So a lot of the stats that I'm going to reference are really national data, and I don't think we're that different, but it may differ a little bit. But and you can find a little bit different stats on this depending on where you look and when you look. But it says here 64% of jail inmates have a mental illness compared to 21% of the general adult population. So that's what I mean. I say that we funnel people with mental illness to jails. That's what I mean. We are concentrating people who have mental illness and substance use into jail settings and prison settings. And then the next slide is a little hard to see, but there's 2 graphs. These are, again, national data, and they're basically showing that compared to the general population, so I'm doing the graph in the upper right-hand corner right now, the smallest bar in that top graph is the general population, and it's looking at rates of substance use disorder. And again, I can't even see the numbers, so I'm sure you guys can't, you have a smaller one, but let's just say it's like 8% of the population has a substance use disorder. And then when we look at people who've been arrested in the past year, about 40% of them have a substance use disorder. And then we look at people who are in state or federal prison, and it's about 50% have substance use disorder. So again, lots of people in those settings with substance use disorders. And then the bottom one is comparing serious mental illness in the general population to the population that's incarcerated. And you can see that it's much higher in general. And then the bottom three are broken down to bipolar disorder, post-traumatic stress disorder, and schizophrenia or other psychotic disorders. And again, much higher prevalence in jail, prison settings than it is in the general public. Another statistic, this is another thing that's hard to find great data on, but so the most recent I could find in 2019, about 15% of jail deaths were attributed to drug or alcohol intoxication or overdose, which is a significant increase since 2000. So there have, when you look at trends in death in jails, which is of course where people are often entering the carceral system, by the time they go to prison, a lot of times they've stabilized in jail. The contribution of mental health and substance use to deaths in jail has gone up. That's very high over the past 25 years. Okay. Another point I wanted to make is that people who are in jail have high rates of serious psychological distress. So this comes from I'm on this particular graph here. This comes from a report from the Department of Justice. It's from 2017. It's the most recent I could find. I will also add, most of the metrics related to mental health and substance use all got worse during COVID. So if it's bad in 2017, it's very likely quite a bit worse now because of COVID, because that really amplified a lot of mental health and substance use complications and use and occurrence. In this one, it's labeled figure 1. The first thing you can see is that the serious psychological distress is about double in jail inmates than it is in people who are, it says prisoners, and that's state or federal prisons. So our jail is a place where we're going to see high rates of psychological distress. And then when we look at history of a mental health problem, it's a little bit higher in jail settings than it is in prison settings. And not having a mental health disorder is actually lower in jail settings, and people who go to prison end up being more likely to have a mental health diagnosis. So a lot of stress, even if there's a little bit less mental illness in jail than there is in prison. And then the figure 3 on the right is just looking at rates of serious psychological distress. It's highest among jail inmates compared to the adult general population. The general population has never had any criminal involvement. People who are under supervision, so probation, parole, and then people who have been arrested, not necessarily charged with or convicted of a crime. So I think of the jail as a place where we're going to see a lot of people with mental health problems, substance use problems, and also just distress. The next two tables, I think the main thing I want to say here are, so people who were in jail for less than 1 month had the highest rates of serious psychological distress compared to people who were in jail a little bit longer. Yeah, I think that's the main thing I want to say. This particular report looked at mental health, diagnosis, and also serious psychological distress by age, by gender, by the reason they were there, the length of time that they had been there, to try to distill some of that. Okay, and then I did mention that that mental health and substance use have contributed to fatalities in jails over time. This particular graph comes from a report from Statista, and basically looking at causes of jail deaths in 2019. And you can see suicide is the #1 cause of death in a jail setting. So a mental health condition, and then everything else is for that one. Okay. Next point I want to make is that we know about things that make mental health and substance use worse. I'm gonna go through those, but I can just say, when I talk to people every day about their mental health condition and their substance use disorder, many of them can identify a lot of things in their past or things that they've experienced that have either, they think contributed to them having those symptoms or made those symptoms worse recently. So there's a lot of data about adverse childhood experiences, which is, that's a whole nother talk. But a lot of trauma in childhood and experiences in childhood can predispose people to have both mental health and substance use disorders, as well as physical health conditions like heart disease. Trauma and severe or long-term stress, often identified as a reason that people are struggling with their mental health and or using substances. Social isolation makes those worse, and we saw that with COVID. Unemployment and lack of housing contribute to depression and substance use. Experiencing discrimination contributes to substance use and mental health problems. Stigma makes those worse. Social media, maybe not a relevant point, but there's growing data that contributes to poor mental health outcomes. And then just the last thing is just that a lot of people are using substances to deal with their mental health problems, and a lot of people have mental health problems because of their substance use. So it's often very bidirectional. The next graph, I'm on this one, is basically just looking at different types of adverse childhood experiences and how they correlate with development of PTSD, and emotional neglect in childhood is a high predictor for developing post-traumatic stress disorders. Childhood sexual abuse also a big risk factor for developing PTSD. Okay, so that's kind of depressing, but the next point I want to make is that we actually have a lot of really effective treatments for mental health and substance use disorders, and they're really underutilized. So now on this picture here, I listed a whole bunch of different effective treatments that we know for various mental health and substance use disorders. So for example, in the upper left-hand, stimulant use disorder, or so methamphetamine or cocaine, we have some effective treatments for them. One is called contingency management, which again, that's in a whole other talk. I'm happy to explain what that is if you want. Basically, providing incentives and rewards for positive, desirable behaviors. And also medications can help with this. There are effective treatments for schizophrenia that includes some medications, family psychoeducation, assertive community treatment, supported employment, and first episode interventions. There's effective treatments for opioid use disorder, including medications and group therapies. There's effective treatments for alcohol use disorder, which includes medications, psychotherapy, mutual support groups, and a social learning model. And then effective treatments for depression includes medications, psychotherapy, bright light therapy, transcranial magnetic stimulation, ECT. So there's like lots of treatments for these conditions. And they are woefully underutilized. About 20% of people, I think that might be actually in my later slide.
Why are they underutilized? I mean, is there like
talk to?
Oh, okay.
A lot, I mean, I could ask about, so with substance use disorders, about 20% of people get treatment. And about half of them who get treatment that's got scientific evidence that is effective. And a big reason is stigma and lack of awareness that that there are effective treatments. And also nobody wants to pay for them, or people pay a little bit of reimbursement for them. They're poorly reimbursed. It's hard to get people to go into those fields because they're going to make more money if they go into other fields. There's a lot of things. There's a lot of people who feel like it's their fault because like society says it's bad choices that somebody developed a substance use disorder, so their fault. So there's a lot of sort of false beliefs and lack of connecting people to these services.
Thank you.
This next graph is related to treatment of opioid use disorder, and it's looking at mortality rates. And so the green bar is the general population. So let's just say that the mortality rate is 1. It's not a unit or anything, but just as for comparison. And then if we look at people with opioid use disorder who get no treatment, their mortality rate is 6 times higher. And then if we look at people with opioid use disorder who do get treatment, their mortality rate is not quite 1. It's not quite what the general population has, but it's a lot lower than untreated. And it's closer to the general population than the population of people who aren't getting treatment. So again, the treatment works, it makes a difference, keeps people alive. Okay, a little bit of jail stuff now. So this is 2 graphs that come from some studies looking at initiating treatment for, in this case, opioid use disorder. But they're there are some things that are special about opioid use disorder, but there's a lot that's not special about opioid use disorder. Things that work in opioid use disorder, like that model also works for other substance use disorders, and it also works for mental health disorders. But really what they found is that they were able to initiate treatment for opioid use disorder while somebody was incarcerated, that there were a lot of positive things that happened afterwards. They were way more likely to be on treatment 30 days later. They were way less likely to be back in the jail later. And so it's a, like, we concentrate people with these conditions here in a jail or in a prison. And we know that if we actually do treatment there in that setting, we have a lot of desirable outcomes that are good for them, but good for everybody. Okay. I think I have one. Oh, here we go. This is a little bit back to, the next slide is about treatment rates. And so on the left, it's looking at treatment for people, treatment for any mental illness, and then treatment for serious mental illness. So serious mental illness is like schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, and then severe depression, maybe with psychotic symptoms. People who have very severe symptoms, they are actually a little more likely to get treatment. They have pretty severe conditions. And even so, it's about 70% of them are getting treatment. So that's 30% of people with a very serious debilitating condition that are not getting treatment. People who have any mental illness, so that's going to start including things like ADHD and depression and anxiety. Those rates of treatment are about 50% of people are going to get treatment. And then the circle on the right is substance use disorder, and that little orange slice is people who thought they needed treatment but didn't seek it. And then there's a teeny slice that you can't even see, which is people who are seeking treatment that have substance use disorder. So substance use disorder very undertreated, and I think pretty well represented in the jail. So
Yeah.
probably a lot of opportunity to intervene here. Okay, I'm just going to go over the last thing. So we know what makes mental health and substance use things. Here, I'm jumping into the therapeutic interventions. We know what makes things worse, but there are some things that also make them better. And so I tried to come up with a list of things that I thought would be relevant for thinking about a jail setting that we could maybe introduce that would allow us to use the things that we know that help this population. So access to natural light and views of nature, reduced noise and sensory overload, privacy and dignity, flexible spaces for programming and treatment, housing based on clinical need, meaning like a person who is has a lot of mental health needs, it might be best to have a space for people who have similar needs to be together rather than creating sensory overload for everybody. Normalizing the environment, and what I mean by that is making life in prison or jail as similar as possible to life in the community, focused on resocialization, rehabilitation. People don't do I don't work in a jail. I do see patients up in at Hope House and at the Larry Nelson Center, which is sort of in its halfway house. But I see a lot of people who've been in jail and been in prison, and it's hard to go back to and most people leave the prison or jail setting, right? And it's very hard psychologically to go back into the community. And so the more we can help prepare people for that, the better. And safety without isolation. Again, isolation was terrible for mental health and substance use during COVID, and it's also really difficult when people are access to screening, education, and rehabilitative programming. I mean, it sounds like that people saw some of that in the tours that they did, and space for family engagement. I mean, it's great to meet with your lawyer, but people also need to be able to plan their support system, the people that they have to reintegrate with when they leave. And I know what's not on here is solitary confinement or punishment and isolation actually do not help mental health problems. And since this is ultimate, I mean, I realize I'm coming from a psychiatric hospital setting. I realize that's not what we're talking about, but in the end, that's kind of the population of people that we're dealing with, and you can probably borrow some strategies from that setting and focus on helping people get better and not come back. Okay, that was all I have to say. That's all I have to say.
It's kind of interesting because when we went to Woodbury County, I didn't necessarily know what to expect, but I thought maybe it would be a little more, lock them up and throw away the key kind of attitude. But every single thing you have here, they were doing, and they were proud of it. And they were noting that they get better results because of it. So wouldn't you agree, Brad?
Yeah, I mean, all of us say for maybe two things on here are things that. Yeah, you can do all of these things in a facility that has the capability. Aside from, outside exercise, I mean, a lot of what we're talking about are things that are possible.
Yeah.
In a new facility. And not lead to better outcomes on the outside, but even while they're in there, you have less conflict, you have opportunities to diffuse conflict.
And practice conflict resolution skills and interacting with people and stuff. I mean, there's actually a lot of things that can be done in that setting to help people gain some skills that, or, enhance their skills that they can use later on that might help them on the back here. Right.
I just want to add that yes to all of this. And I also want to say, having gone to substantial number of CIT trainings now, the folks here are already well aware of all of this and are very much making the best of a very difficult situation in a horrific space. And when I say horrific, I mean the physical space. It's awful. I could not wait to leave jail when I came for a tour there. I could not wait to get out of there. And I'm fairly normal. And all I kept thinking was, how would my son handle being in this space, and how easily could he kill himself on the corner of that concrete slab? So I think that everybody in this room is very dedicated to providing a lot of these therapeutic things that will be helpful. And also it fits in with what Jude brought back from the All Rise conference in terms of criminal mental health courts. What they're learning with the research is positive reinforcement works. Punishment never works for our populations. So I absolutely concur with all of this. And I'm so glad to hear that these other spaces allow for some of this to happen.
And hopefully we'll also create space for, as Rachel was saying, more jail diversion, because if we can even avoid that altogether. I just see so many people who have a lot of psychological trauma from their incarceration experience, and it doesn't help them. I mean, I get to have the luxury of only looking at it from the standpoint of their mental health. I realize that it's a bigger picture, but if we can find ways to avoid that.
The part of diversion, like in the future, is getting them treatment when they're in today.
Yeah.
So I think we need to think about, if you have space to treat them in the jail today, the likelihood of them coming back to the jail reduces. So I think we need to broaden our understanding of what diversion means, because it looks like a lot of different things, and a lot of people think it's a program, but it really just is a way of thinking about the system creatively. So I think that's one.
I mean, and it's also a therapeutic space. I mean, there's furniture out there for correctional facilities that are softer and kind of like, it's not as hard steel and hard bars and even the doors alone. I mean, if you create an environment just to have that, that added touch of like, okay, this is a softer space. I could be more relaxed and more comfortable and have room to kind of, really spread out and have those discussions. And and you like really painting the walls. I mean, it's just little things, little touches like that that really kind of, draw that anxiety down when they're in custody and stuff like that. It's just not as far as facilities.
And it makes life on staff easier too.
I was gonna say.
It's a staff wellness.
Yes.
The biggest contributors to, morale issues in any jail and ours is the building itself.
Yeah.
Is the actual, when you have to come in small feet or whatever it may be, or the life of the staff. It matters. It has an impact on the staff.
Absolutely. And the staff being in a better space, like if their wellness has an impact on the experience of people that are there.
Yeah, I can really appreciate what you said about COVID too. And I think that, even before that, with the disinvestment from, the United States in terms of, are we going to get housing for people that are most at risk? Are we going to be, basically criminalizing Black women for having children? Like, there's so much systemic pressure that really dropped the floor on people that were already in crisis, that now the jail is really the only place for people to end up. And so how are we on the one hand, when, Rachel's talking about diversion is also investing in our community for this program. In Johnson County, we do a lot of, we always say we can do more. But I bring that up because when we're looking at the creation of a new jail or design for a new jail, like we have to be about those spaces in that way because it is at that doorstep. I mean, it just is, it's the last stop. We don't have the, for better or for worse, like we don't have the model that's like, we're gonna put you in an institution, right? So like, oh, well, I guess we'll just like integrate everybody and like, it'll be fine. Like, and without those social safety nets that we just don't have, quite frankly, for so many never have. The jail is the place where people end up. And I think that there's a very big reality, especially with Johnson County and like how the state sees us. But I think people do come here for resources and they do come here to get, especially with like, if you have disability or if you have mental health or if you have, food insecurity, those kinds of things. We are seen as a place where people come. And so I say that as like, we're thinking about the design. I don't think you can take those two things. So I appreciate your presentation because I do think we need to have a real focus on this moving forward.
We're kind of a mental health treatment facility, whether we want. I mean, we may as well just embrace it and try to do a good job.
And to help staff.
While
And
also
so-
promoting all the other things.
Yeah,
Absolutely, absolutely.
I mean, the impact on staff is great. It's not just the building, but of course, being able, like you were saying, to monitor for, dually, like you can see, okay, we need to assist somebody here. Is that a medical issue? Is, being able to literally be able to see things. Like that's big, right? That's a stress that we need to relieve that stress.
Well, and also people who have untreated mental health and substance misuse problems are harder to take care of. And people who get treatment are actually much easier to take care of. So that also has tons of benefits for staff.
Thank you, Dr. Lynch. Any additional questions or discussion? We will look forward to receiving a digital copy of your presentation and if we have any follow-up questions, we'll send them along. Thank you so much. Item C3 is update on proposed project agreement between Johnson County and the University of Iowa Center for Social Science Innovation, CSSI. Item 1 under that is discuss public survey focus groups and proposed timeline updates. Aaron.
Hi, everybody. I'll give a quick update because I know we're running long. It's our goal to be done around 4:30. Okay. I'll do my best. We reached out to CSSI, which is a division of the, not the Palo Center anymore. It's Center for Social Science Innovation with the university to help us with a survey and some focus groups. And we've been going back and forth for several weeks. Great group to work with. And where we've landed, if you'll recall, is we're going to move forward with a mail survey. I'm going to run real quick through some of the details just so we're all on the same page because this is going to go out the door in about 3 weeks. So when you guys hear about it in the community, you can support and confirm and corroborate what's going on. But the goal is 400 completes, right? 400 responses to have a viable data set to inform public perspectives about building the new jail. So that means we're going to send out about 4,000 mail surveys. They are going to send out 4,000 mail surveys. They're going to sit back and they'll get a few back, right? Response rates on mail surveys are around 12 to 13%. They're also going to code a phone survey follow-up, meaning they'll take that whole mail survey, code it into a system, and they'll call people who haven't responded. So when they're getting that data set that gives them all the addresses, they're also going to get name and phone number. So they're going to literally reach back out to people they haven't heard from, again, to try to build those completes. The mail survey will have $1 in it. It's a common tool in the toolbox for mail surveys to kind of get your attention and get you to reply. There's also a second mailing. So about 2 weeks in, they'll send a whole nother batch to people that they haven't heard at all, either phone or mail. And hopefully at the end of about, I think it's a 6 to 8 week field time, they'll get all those answers back and they'll literally send it out and transcribe that data into a data set that they will compile, clean, and then tell us some great summary statements. So that is the mail survey that we're going to do. We also have, not in this particular contract, but to turn on when we need, we also want to do some focus groups. And I think that the subcommittee yesterday, which I'll talk about here in a second, made a good point that they think focus groups specific to people who maybe say things or provide things in the mail survey, the focus groups are a good place to ask a little bit more specific questions or follow-up. And I think we all agree with that, and I hear that. But I'm a little bit concerned that the building feasibility study might have some overlap with some of the data that they're collecting in terms of what want the buildings look like. So we'll work through that. We know that. I just think it's a little early, but, and I know the board definitely wants some, but I'm just saying, we'll figure it out when we get there. And CSSI is willing to also turn that on as needed. So that's what we're doing. It's a mail survey, it's focus groups, probably to be determined details, budget, the board has conveyed maximum budget authority, and they'll see that next week to formally approve. So then we also created a small subcommittee of 7 of you on this committee to talk about the survey and basically give CSSI a draft set of questions, 35 to 50. You got your sample demographics, right, where you live, race, et cetera. And then about 30 questions that we talked about actually yesterday was our first meeting. Ethan and Cassidy from CSSI joined us. I actually thought it went really well. Can't speak for those of you who were there. But they basically were looking to invoke themes. You know, what are the themes we can use to inspire questions? And we walked through several yesterday. We have another meeting next week. I will share with the group who was there yesterday. Ethan thinks he has enough to show you a draft set of questions by next week. So I'm pretty excited about that. So we're moving right along. And of course, the board will be, and I actually thinking a process, I haven't thought this through. I'll probably forward it to the greater committee too after the subcommittee's done for additional feedback, but it'll probably be in your inbox pretty quick. So with kind of that explanation of what we're actually doing and that the elements of the mail survey and the focus group in terms of timing, just some major milestones. So again, we're looking to mail out that survey probably the second week of May. And they call that the field date, right? When it's out and they're waiting on responses from wherever it's coming in. And that closes. I thought I had that in here. I don't. Oh, here I am. Data collection phase ends. So 7/18. So yeah, that's 2 months, right? That the survey is live. Then they'll come back to us probably late July, early August with a data set of what the survey results actually are. So that's just to give you an idea. One side note, I have talked to the city and to Shive and to several people on this team about this data effort, this data collection effort, and the building feasibility study, and everybody is aware, and we'll try to run those in tandem. I believe, and maybe Sheriff Kunkel can help me, that the building feasibility study is expected to have maybe a preliminary result in October. Does that sound right to you?
I'm talking, I'm looking at my notes.
But all I want to convey, and because I think the board has made this apparent on prior, that look, this data needs to go to that, and they need to kind of talk and inform and inspire, and getting the head nods from Shive on that front. So again, doing what I can, but obviously taking.
That sounds right. We had our first sit down with Shive. It was a 30,000 foot meeting with just myself and Chief Mike. Back on the 26th, we're trying to line a meeting again for maybe next week. To have a broader meeting with the command staff from patrol investigation to dive in some of those cases.
Brett, could you make sure that Dave Curtis gets an invitation to those meetings? Thank you.
So again, flying really fast with the mail survey, and again, the subcommittee, obviously the intention, everybody was aware, was to get together and get the draft, but I will be forwarding you guys a copy, but we will ask for that response pretty quick if you don't mind, because again, but so I'll take any questions, but that's what's going on with the survey. So pretty exciting. It's moving really fast. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions, discussion?
I wonder if having Melissa be a part of the building discussion would be a good idea. Our special projects. Melissa is our special projects manager and usually handles like our special projects. And kind of works in things, in terms of just like does a lot of like the work farm, but also other things. So I was just thinking she should probably be at those meetings too.
She should probably be at this one. Yeah, I mean, really, that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, she just got back from leave, but we can build her into this and yeah. I've talked to her about it generally. I haven't thought about that, but then I suppose so we can do that.
Very good. Anything else on the surveys? All right, item B, other. Any other business for the good of the order? Just looking online. All right, well, it looks like we have wrapped up. The next meeting of the CJCC will be May 8th at 3:30. However, please pay keen attention to the agenda for the location. It's our hope that we'll be in the new boardroom for board meetings by that time, but we will probably remain in 203C for this meeting. It'll be noted on the agenda when the agenda is published. All right, thank you, everyone. With no additional business, we are adjourned.